Coaching as Benevolence, a podcast for people who are curious about using coaching for self-development. I'm Eryn with Roots and Wings Grief and Loss Coaching.
And I'm L Shawn with Michelle Sage Place Positive Intelligence Coaching.
All right, we are continuing our reflections on our guided journal, Coaching Nuggets of Wisdom to Inspire, Explore, Act, Flourish, a guided journal to live your best life. And we are in section 3, which is taking action. And we are looking at prompt 5 today. And I'm just going to go ahead and read this prompt now, and then we'll spend the rest of our time interrogating it and feeling into it and enjoying what we can glean from this guided journal prompt. Take time in your life intentionally to notice the things that are going well. Pause and gently turn your gaze toward what is flowing with ease in your life. What is working, unfolding, or quietly thriving beneath the surface? Let appreciation rise, not as a performance, but as a soft recognition of grace. What do these bright spots reveal about where you are being supported? What feels aligned with creating a practice of noticing the ease and flow of your life? Wow, this is written so poetically. And I really like how this prompt is written. And as I was reading it aloud, where it says just at the beginning, take time to notice the things that are going well, it was just kind of like this, okay, oh yeah, take a breath and reflect on what's going well. But then the next sentence where it says turning your gaze to what is flowing with ease in your life, that really captured me because it made me think about what is going well a little bit differently and then what is flowing with ease. It feels almost like flowing with ease is a difficult concept for me to grasp in relationship to what is going well, because not everything that's going well has to flow with ease, but what is flowing with ease can definitely capture our understanding of ourselves about what is going well. And ease is an interesting word for me right now here because I feel like as we're coming into the end of the summer, it's been a bunch of back and forth between childcare and work. And so ease doesn't feel like a word that's overly accessible right now. So this is one that I think I love to sit with and just kind of reflect on and journal about more. Writing down what's going well is easier for me to do. Talking about what's going with flowing with ease in my life, that's harder, which is interesting to me. I wonder if that's how it is for other people or, L Shawn, what that's like for you. So this prompt, I really appreciate how it holds both of those in the first part of the prompt.
Yeah, the language of ease and flow comes from positive intelligence and the idea that when you're aligned and when you are just going through life and things are falling into place, when I think of ease and flow, I think this is something that requires very little effort, that it is, something that is almost on autopilot, and it's often stuff that we take for granted. For example, I'm going to take something very mundane as something as simple and mundane as your car starting when you put the key in the ignition. And I do agree with you. Things going well does not necessarily indicate ease and flow. So I do think that there are two different things, but the thing I like about this prompt is that it brings your attention to things that are going well. We have a tendency to see the things that are not going well. The things that need our attention are usually the things that need improvement or need to be changed or need to be addressed. I think it's really important to be intentional about looking at the things that are going well. Looking at the things that do lend themselves to ease and flow in your life, those are the things that we take for granted. And I think it's really important to take the time to look at them because it's easy to see. For example, I'm going to speak for myself. There's so many things that need to be addressed in my work life. And I often have to tell myself, yes, that didn't go according to plan, or that is not working very well, or that needs repair. What's working? What is working? What is going well, and why? And can I do more of what's going well in this area and apply that to what's not going well? Or is this something that I can learn from and maybe understand why it goes well, rather than just saying, oh, that's fine, I don't have to worry about that? It's like, the squeaky wheel is the one that gets the attention, but the other wheels get no attention at all because they're working. And I think that's one of the reasons that this prompt is so important, because it allows us to pay attention to those that are working, even if it's just to know that it's not all bad, because I think we can get really narrow-minded and also short-sighted if we're only looking at the things that are going wrong. And then it's easy to then make or draw the conclusion that everything's going wrong, So for me, this is as a way of encouraging myself, and also just kind of a spark of hope, is to say, that is going well. And even though some things are not going well, what are going well, and where are things easy for me or flowing well? Those are the things that I like to turn to, especially when things are getting a little challenging.
All right. Well, okay. So I guess I'll add this piece in here, I think, maybe because this is so as we're recording, my 7-year-old, walks into the room, and automatically my brain switches from all the reflection that you were just talking about what's going well, to this isn't going well, right? What just happened here?
Yeah.
But I think with that piece, when we switch, it's so easy to switch into that what's not going well, and I can switch back out of that right now with my daughter and be like, okay, there is joy that she's here. There's a chance for her to listen to our podcast recording, which is also something that might be going well. A chance for perspective shifting, which is a huge theme in coaching, that we make shifts about how we view things. And I think that shifting is what allows for buoyancy, but that also might allow for the gentle ease. And when you ask that question about what can you learn from what is going well, that reminds me of that question. It just leads to curiosity, right? Which gives us a greater understanding. And what is it? And, with Ted Lasso coming out again for its next season, it starts this week. He has curiosity over judgment. There's a line in there that he says something like, Walt Whitman said, curiosity over judgment, or something. And it kind of stuck as this theme from the show that a lot of people latched onto. And it's so interesting because I know we've been talking a lot about that throughout our podcast as well. But by taking that curious stance, it allows us to move into this action phase of the journal that helps us better understand what is flowing with ease and how do we continue to take action in that way. And so one thing that I also wanted to touch on is what it says in the sentence that is the start of the second paragraph. That's a question. It says, what is working, unfolding, or quietly thriving beneath the surface? When I read that, I had this moment of thriving beneath the surface, meaning it's maybe not fully become yet, but it's becoming. And that concept of becoming really stuck out to me. And so I think there are little things like that are percolating for so many people. And it's just a matter of then how does that relate to the action that one wants to take? So take a moment, sit with that question. What is quietly thriving beneath the surface? How is that showing up in your life? How do you get more of that? How do you respond to that? Whatever, question is going to resonate with you. And this helps me combine patience and taking action. That provides a level-headedness of patience with taking action. And that really, really stands out to me.
I love that you're bringing in what's happening with your 7-year-old being in the room, and how that is not, you could see that this is not going well. But a few observations of ease and flow in this whole thing is, one, that you were able to pivot very easily into, okay, my 7-year-old is here. This was not the plan. Let me just integrate her into our conversation. Let's integrate this whole thing, how life brings unexpected things, interruptions, and not everything goes according to plan. But where I saw ease and flow in this whole exchange was that you were able to pivot, meet the needs of your child, go back into what you were saying so smoothly. And there was ease and flow in that I noticed. I think it began, just from my observations, it began with your acceptance of, well, this is happening, and I'm just going to go with it. I'm not going to resist it. I'm just going to go with it. And the minute that you decided, I'm going to accept this and I'm going to bring this into the conversation, there was a release of tension and in your voice, in your body, and you just went with it. And so where I was seeing a kind of a dance of working, focusing on the podcast, then focusing on your 7-year-old and just doing what needed to be done in the moment, there was ease and flow there. So I wanted to bring that into our conversation because it's a great example of how ease and flow, how things are going well when, just speaking as a mother and someone who has certain expectations of how things need to go. And probably, if I were in your shoes, Eryn, I would be just like really hyper vigilant and be thinking, okay, what's going to happen next? And is that going to show up in the recording? And, all these things going on in my head, but on the outside, how it would look and how it's looking for me as an observer of what's going on is just this acceptance of what is and responding to what's happening in the moment and then moving on. So I think it's a beautiful example of how one can focus on the ease and flow rather than what's not going well, because it's really easy to get really tense and nervous and concerned about like how this is going to mess with the pacing and the flow of the podcast itself. But the way that you integrate it, the way that you chose to accept it and integrate it, that to me is an example of something going well. It's an unexpected and delightful change to the way that our podcast usually goes. You and I are organically having a conversation, and if there's an interruption or if there's something that happens, we would pause the recording. You would see what your 7-year-old needs, and then we would continue. But instead, this is very interesting. Instead, you decided to just go with it. So I would ask you, what was going on for you in that moment?
Oh, that's a good question. And it wasn't as much ease and flow as it looked like. And I realized I just got outsmarted again by a 7-year-old. So here we are again.
It's ease and flow. That worked out for her. Mom, distracted. Let me take advantage.
Exactly. And that's exactly what happened. And I hate to admit it, but I am totally going to admit it. She has my phone now. Part of her ease and flow plan. No, but I think it was interesting because it wasn't like she wasn't planted into the conversation. She showed up when it was a good opportunity for an example of ease and flow, which is really interesting. It just happened. And I did vacillate between do I just stop or let's just keep going and see what happens? And I think this time I was like, let's just see what happens. And you noticed that was like acceptance. And part of what I noticed is it was the path of least resistance. So it's like both of those things, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think when we think about taking action, those concepts of acceptance and the path of least resistance really can show up with this prompt of, noticing things that are going well. We don't always have to take the path of the most resistance. And I sometimes forget that. I think that it's ingrained in us as kind of like an individualistic society that's like, oh, you have to suffer and take the path of the most, take the most resistant path. And there's nothing wrong with taking the path of least resistance. And in fact, I saw this morning in my newsfeed about how those who are happiness is it really, I guess, to summarize this, just kind of let go of a sense of false control and are okay just existing as who they are, right? And that is really challenging, especially in the action section of a journal. It's like, okay, so you're telling me as I plan on taking action and moving forward with my life, I just need to exist? Well, kind of. I know in my own life, when I have done that, things have gone better than when I have tried to force something out of fear, out of scarcity, out of being scared, out of judgment, out of lack of confidence, out of so many things that have made me look externally to the outside world for my validation or for my purpose or for my worth in life. And I was like, okay, take that and turn that inward. When those moments are with ease or showing up inside of yourself, what do you notice? Oftentimes, right, they might be in times of play, like we've talked about in the past, or they may be in times of when you're doing certain kinds of work, or when there is a person or people around you. And I think those noticings are important to notice. And this isn't being just, Pollyanna and only taking the easy way, because that's doesn't always help us with our personal growth or help us understand the complexity of our own lives. But it is about turning our gaze toward that ease. And I think that is a practice in itself that requires discipline and time and, really a lot of intention. And so those are some of the things that were kind of coming up for me in this situation with my daughter. And then as that relates to the prompt.
Yeah, I like getting the internal workings that were happening for you cognitively and also emotionally, as the outside was showing a lot of just, okay, she needs this. Okay, I answered this question. Okay, let me get back to the reflection. Okay. And then she leaves with my phone. So
right. Perspective on the situation with, just from seeing it from an outside perspective is different, right? Yeah. Yes. And I think that's a great point about listening to our own inner voice about what we need about our own ease. So yeah.
Yeah. One image that comes to mind is the beautiful swan that gracefully moves almost effortlessly along the beautiful surface of a pond, but underneath their little legs are going, a million miles an hour. They're working hard, but when you look at them, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like that swan is just gracefully gliding across the still surface of the pond. No effort. So it's really interesting to see how, as an outside observer, what I observe is ease and flow and acceptance, and what you interpret as what's happening is I'm just taking the path of least resistance. If I fight this is a fight, and I don't want to choose your battles, right? That's what we as we choose our battles. So that's another interesting thing about how different perspectives can lead to different interpretations. Very interesting, that whole experience with your 7-year-old coming in and this disrupting the flow of our podcast, but then also adding to the richness of this episode. And it couldn't have been planned, right? So this is another thing that as things shift and unexpected things happen in our lives, it's really important to remember that doesn't mean that everything's ruined or that, that it's a bad thing. We don't have to draw the conclusion that because things shifted or they didn't go exactly as planned, that it's necessarily a bad thing. And even if the outcome is not what you want and it leads to severe or really unpleasant outcome, there is a way for us to strengthen our mindset and our resilience and our ability to keep going, is to look at, okay, so this was, you could say this was a disaster. Okay, you could say this was a disaster. Let me look back at, so I'm dealing with the outcome right now. Let me look back and see what I can learn from this, or let me look back and see what's come out of this that maybe isn't so bad. It goes back to, Eryn, the art form that you referred to.
Kintsugi.
Yeah, kintsugi, which is putting that gold in the cracks. Even though, this pottery was broken, you can make it even more beautiful by adding those gold lines to it. And it's a new work of art. It's a new something. And the reason why it has been transformed into something beautiful is the addition of the gold. So that's something that I was thinking about as well, that the ability to pivot and shift and intentionally look at what works well. I'm going to go back to what I said before. It does spark hope. And I think that that's something that we need, especially in the face of dire circumstances or in the face of just things going wrong, things going wrong. And, one thing can lead to another, and it could just get to the point where you want to give up and where you move from dealing with all the different things that are coming up, and then you move to despair. And when you move to despair, then that leads to inaction, and that leads to stagnation. This practice of seeing both the good and the bad, seeing what goes well and what doesn't, seeing what needs to be improved and what is great as it is, and also seeing oneself as what's going well, just existing, as you were saying, Eryn. I know this is the action section or the act section of the journal. I do think it's important also to hold in our minds that we are human beings as well as human doing. And I think it's really important to balance those two, balance productivity and just being and existing, because that is enough. I think we have this constant message in society, especially the one that we're in North America and the United States, that productivity is valued. Rest isn't as valued as productivity. Often people who are not contributing to society are seen as less valuable. And I think it's easy for us in our culture to dismiss that, people who are not productive. And I think in dismissing people who are not productive, we dismiss ourselves when we're not productive. And I think there's value in both. There's value in rest. There's value in movement. There's value in stillness, quiet. There's also value in the noise. So it's really important for us as humans to practice that skill and that trait of discernment that we are all blessed with. Any thoughts coming up for you, Eryn?
Oh, I love how you highlighted the both and piece of this prompt. That was so nicely said. And then when you talked about stagnation and like the worth of a being, of a human being, it's innate worth or their innate worth. And I think that is such an invaluable concept that not only relates to this prompt, but just is a spiritual and fulfilling way to view other human beings or to see ourselves as well. Because like you said, we cut that off from ourselves if we're viewing others that way too. And so I really, really appreciated that. And then I got on this like trail of, okay, so this last question, what feels aligned with creating a practice of noticing the ease and flow of your life? Kind of how you were talking about with the ease and flow, it leads to just more aligned action in a way. So I guess this is the question that maybe our listeners might have too. So how do I do that? So what feels aligned with creating a practice of noticing the ease and flow of your life? Because once you get into this practice more consistently, things tend to go better. So how do you do that? How do you create a practice of noticing? And I mean, I'm always starting with the least common denominator, the smallest option of how to do this. And I know that for me, it's been an evolution over time, it's specifically in relationship to gratitude. And you can hear this in our podcast throughout the years where I'm like, I've always struggled with a gratitude practice and I think just by acknowledging that, it opened it up. It opened more space up for me to institute more of a gratitude practice, and it wasn't forced. And so it was really interesting because it's like, if I were to go back and say, how did I get to where I am with this gratitude practice that I've been doing in the evenings? I think it was first that acknowledgement of like, this is something I'm not good at. This is something I don't do and I don't want to do. And that just was like this like seed. So it's like, how did I get from there to here now? And I know part of it was like, I'm just going to I think in one of our podcast episodes, it was like a list of what you're grateful for or something. And I just went on. And it was like this breakthrough of like, it just kept going and going and going and going. So part of it is timing and noticing those moments that open you up to something more and something better and something new. So in the podcast where we did that, and I had that whole list of gratitude, that opened me up even more again. So it's like these moments of expansion, right? It's like it started with admitting this isn't my thing. Then it started with like, oh, this expanded how much I could write down, as well as how helpful that was too. And then it just kept growing from there. So I guess, first of all, it's noticing like, what is the seed to start this movement within yourself? And what will create that expansion for you to add this to your life? And also, there's no pressure in it, right? Like, let it happen organically, but with intention. So maybe one day you, in the morning at breakfast, notice one thing of ease and flow in your life. And then that evening, maybe you observe something else that has ease and flow that's not related to you, right? Like kind of going between the self and getting outside of the self. Because I think that's also important, is really being able to observe the ease and flow of other people, or the ease and flow of animals or nature, or whatever it may be. So it's like that internal work with the observation of the external. So those are a few just like starting ideas that I have for people who want to implement a practice of noticing ease and flow. And then again, just starting very small, right? Like, okay, so today at breakfast, I noticed this was going with ease and flow. And then tomorrow I noticed that I feel differently about what I thought wasn't going very well. And now it is, right? So it's also being open to the flexibility of the human experience too. So, and this is where coaching comes in with an individual client in such a magical way, because then we can brainstorm together what specifically may work for that client to implement ease and flow in a more specific and tailored way to the individual, their personality, their day-to-day needs, etc. So that's what I'd suggest, I guess, here at the end of the prompt.
I love that you went to almost a call to action there with going outside of yourself and inside of yourself. And that brought to mind what happened with your 7-year-old when she came in. And I was able to, while you were reflecting, notice what I was interpreting as ease and flow that was happening in that moment, and being able to see that and to intentionally look for that. I was intentionally looking for the ease and flow. I was able to see the ease and flow. So I want to bring that to how the things that we pay attention to are the things that are going to appear in our noticing. And if we intentionally notice the things that are going well, just like with your list, Eryn, it's going to expand, and you're going to see more and more and more of what is going well. And as humans, we need those little wins, because when we see things that are going well, that gives us encouragement to know that, oh, it's not all bad. It's not all going wrong. Now, if we focus only on the problem, that's what we're going to see. Problem, 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 problem. We won't see the solution because we're not focusing on the solution. And the other thing that we know about the human brain is that we cannot focus on more than one thing at a time. And so if we choose intentionally to look at what is going well, because we have a tendency to look at what is not going well, because our brains recognize novelty. Our brains recognize the things that are, different or changing. If we can train ourselves to focus on the things that help us feel like we are progressing or that we are doing well, I think that's really important for our well-being, to have evidence, constant evidence of progress and evidence of our well-being. That is something that when things are going well, when we have ease and flow, when things are going well, that is an indication of well-being. That is an indication of alignment, and it is an indication of congruence. And so it's really important for us to practice that and have a habit of intentionally looking at the things that are working. So I think that we're in that moment of the episode where we shift to call to action. And Eryn, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and share my call to action. I do want to expand a lot of the questions here in terms of implementing this in your life. And my call to action would be to encourage you, and this is kind of echoing back to the micro moments, where you can take baby steps, where you can have micro moments of ease and flow, or where you can have micro moments of noticing in that moment, even if it is the noticing itself that you're noticing. It's a little meta there, but the noticing the things that are going well, which kind of echoes back to what Eryn said previously about how you can integrate this into your life. So my call to action is an invitation to start small, maybe just start with the first moments of the day when you open your eyes, taking the time to notice what is going well. Eryn.
I really like that. And I like how you talked about how you can train yourself to focus on the things that are going well. One thing we didn't quite get to in the prompt was this question of what do these bright spots reveal about where you are being supported? Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I have anything truly around a call of action around that, but I think that it may be helpful to spend some time and recognize that, yes, things are going well. What are those? And then take that to that next question of how are you being supported with those? And that can be through a spiritual lens, yourself, other people, other resources, those sorts of things. And that can create an outflowing of appreciation.
Thanks for joining us for Coaching as Benevolence. I'm LaShawn with Michelle Sage Place, Positive Intelligence Coaching.
And I'm Eryn with Roots and Wings, Grief and Loss Coaching.
Have a benevolent day.